Yeah, so we're on 7p, 4 lines down. So Kimta. So we were talking about yesterday about an egg that fertilized equal or unfertilized. If the egg is fertilized, then we'll assume that it was laid only during the day. If it's unfertilized, then we'll assume that it was laid. It could even be laid at night. Now, Mayu Kimta b'Disfina ba'ara. What is the case in a case when I say that it was an unfertilized egg? What's the case? My area badak, kile badak nami. Because if you look on if we learned the case previously, we said if he checks the coop and he doesn't find an egg in it, and then in the morning he wakes up, we can assume it happened at nighttime. But if a chick usually, if a hen will lay an egg unfertilized at any time, then what's the point of checking? Even if he didn't check the day before, and he still finds an egg on the first night of Yom Tov when he wakes up in the morning, then we can assume that it took place on the first night of night. Why assume that it happened yesterday? So that we say, Kilei Badak Emi Met Mol Havi. There's enough of reason for us to assume that if you didn't check the day, if you didn't check on Erev Yom Tov and you find the egg before sunrise, we could assume at that point that it is from yesterday. If that's the case, even if you check, why is it that when you check when you check on Erev Yom Tov you don't find an egg in the morning when you wake up, when you do find an egg, if there's no rooster around within the vicinity, then we could assume that it's from then we could assume that's an unfertilized egg and was laid at nighttime and it's going to be usher that day, the first day of Yom Tov. But if you didn't check, then we could assume it's from yesterday. What's the difference? Both whether you check, whether you don't check, if there's no rooster around, we could assume that is from the night. And just say, even more so, we can even also assume that even if you checked yesterday, now you can say, well, the reason is because you checked yesterday, you didn't find it. So yeah, but maybe it came out, and we still could be chayshish like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds that if the egg it comes out from the hen more than 50%, and then it reverts back in, that's called a laid egg. Now we say Rabbi Yochanan leishchiach. Now we say Rabbi Yochanan is not shchiach. Therefore, at the end of the day, we are going to say the only scenario where you will say that if you find an egg before sunrise in a chicken coop, the first day of Yom Tov, the only scenario we will say that it's not from yesterday is if there's no rooster in the vicinity and you didn't check yesterday. But now, if there is no rooster in the vicinity and you checked yesterday before nightfall and there was no egg, then we could assume that it is that is the only. If you did check yesterday and you again checked in the morning, first day of Yom Tov, and you find an egg and there's no rooster in the vicinity, then we could assume at that point that is from the nighttime, and therefore it's going to be usher. But if you didn't check yesterday, even with no rooster in the vicinity, it will still be permitted. Or if there is roosters around, we will assume that it is from yesterday and you just didn't see it. And then we ended up saying, and then we have saying, crushed garlic, which is left out overnight, is a sakana because we're afraid of venomous snakes who have touched it, and therefore it is poison. Okay, we're up to the 2 dots. Now, we're continuing in the Mishnah. The Mishnah started off with the egg, but now we're done with the egg, and we are continuing on to another machlekes beis Bisham and beis Hillel. Machlekes beis Bisham and beis Hillel was concerning chametz. That how much chametz is considered is aser. So Bisham said that when it comes to starter dough, that is a kazayis, but when it comes to chametz itself, it's going to be a size of a large date. And beis Hillel said both of them are going to be the size of a kazayis, the size of an olive. Okay. Now, what's the machlekes? But now we're going to focus on that. So Bisham said that starter dough is a kazayis. My tamay to Bisham. What's the difference in Bisham differentiates between starter dough and chametz itself? The Bisham on that we say Now the Torah brings down twice in 2 separate. The Torah brings down the both chametz, which is just regular bread, and sa'ar with the starter dough are both forbidden on Yom Tov, forbidden on Pesach. Now, if it's true that they're both the same size, why is the Torah differentiating between the two? Why mention both? Why did the Torah just write chametz? You don't write sa'ar. And I would say I'll make my own kavachaymer. And just like chametz. Now, if the Torah doesn't say anything, if Torah just says chametz is plainly usher, that's it. We will automatically assume that the isser, the size is kazayis. That's usually what the isser is. That's the default position when it comes to any isser. It's a kazayis. And what about sa'ar? What about starter dough? I can make my own kavachimer. It's just like chametz, which its chametz is not. It's not a very good. It's not a starter dough. It doesn't cause other dough to rise. So it's not a catalyst for chametz. That is a kazayis. Sa'ar shechametz kasha, but sa'ar, which is sa'ar, which its chametz is kasha, that its chametz is strong, like all shekain sa'ar, like all shekain. So that for sure will also be a kazayis. Now, sa'ar da kazar rachman alamali. So if so, why is it that the Torah went ahead and said and told me anything about sa'ar? Why is the Torah coming to add on the extra word? Talking about the starter dough. I'll tell you, the size of one is not like the size of the other. That's why the Torah had to come in and add in the sa'ar. Now, we are on 7b. We're about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're about 10 lines up from the wide lines. Okay, now, Beis Hillel. Now, what does Beis Hillel do? So Beis Hillel says that all chametz, whether starter dough or chametz, all is the same size when it comes to isser. Beis Hillel holds you need both psukim. You need both halachas. Both the Torah has to mention us sa'ar, starter dough, and the Torah also has to tell us chametz. Because of Rachman sa'ar, if the Torah just wrote starter dough have a mina mishum de chamutze kasha, we would assume that since its chametz is it's strong, meaning it's a catalyst, it causes other items, causes other dough to turn to chametz. Therefore, for sure, sa'ar, because that's sort of the source of chametz. So, for sure, if you just wrote sa'ar, we would just think sa'ar's asur, forbidden on Pesach, and not chametz. But since chametz, which is not a strong source of chametz, a malay, perhaps not. So the Torah had to tell us both sa'ar and chametz. Now, because of Rachman chametz, mishum dero la'achila, I might think that the Torah should just write chametz. There's no like kavachimer. Chametz is going to be asur, forbidden. So for sure, sa'ar should be forbidden. So it's strong, which is technically stronger. Now that will say no, because maybe the Torah only told us what is forbidden is chametz because chametz is edible. Sa'ar is not edible. Aval sa'ar she'enro la'achila, but sa'ar which is not really worthy to eat, emolai. So tzricha. So Beis Shammai said. So at the end of the day, we said that Machlekes, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said, give us two different sizes. One for when it comes to the size of how much is asur, how much is forbidden on Pesach. We had starter dough and chametz, two separate sizes. Beis Shammai explained since the Torah told us both sa'ar and chametz are forbidden. I would know one without the other. Just mention one. I would know the other. Therefore, must be teaching us that they're two different sizes. Beis Hillel said, no, I need both of them to be written down. If I wrote sa'ar, starter dough, I would think that perhaps only starter dough is forbidden and not chametz, because chametz is not a catalyst is not a leavening agent, and if I just wrote chametz, I might think only chametz is forbidden because chametz is edible and sa'ar is not edible. So there's reason to write both, but we cannot derive from the fact that the Torah wrote sa'ar and chametz to teach us that both are two different sizes. Now, Beis Shammai, so what's Beis Shammai going to do? Because right now Beis Shammai has a problem. Beis Hillel had a good point. We have to write sa'ar because that's the catalyst. We have to have chametz because that's edible. So we can't derive from these two words that they're different sizes. Beis Shammai less luhu the Reb Zera. So the reason is because Reb Shai does not hold of Reb Zera. What does Reb Zera hold? Reb Zera pasach hakasav b'sa'ar b'sayim b'chametz. The Torah specifically started with sa'ar, and he ended off with chametz. Loimelach zeu sa'ar zeu chametz. Now, on that we say that so according to Beis Shammai that So Beis Shammai doesn't hold it. Zera himself holds that we already know this. Beis Hillel's idea that sa'ar is needed and chametz is needed is brought down by Reb Zera. And it seems like everyone seems to agree that it's pretty obvious that we need chametz and sa'ar. Both of them are needed to be told us that they're both going to be asur. And I would not know one without the other. Therefore, the question is on Beis Shammai. Why is Beis Shammai saying that they're two different sizes? Both words are needed, and we cannot derive from there different sizes. On that we say, so you're right. It's true. This argument in the Mishnah of the size of how much is Isser. Is it a size of a date, or is it a size of a kezayis? And Beis Shammai holds chametz is the size of Beis Shammai holds that sa'ar is that the starter dough is the size of a kezayis, of an olive, and chametz is the size of a date, a large date. That machlokes, that argument is not going on eating, because as the Gemara explains, in achila, kuli amalei pligi. Everyone agrees when it comes to eating that the size doesn't make a difference. That if you eat starter dough or if you eat chametz, it's going to be a kizayis, the araisa. That's the size that's forbidden. Ki pligi. So what is the machlokes in the Mishnah? What is the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel when it comes to the different sizes of sa'ar? That Beis Hillel holds that everything is a kizayis, the size of an olive, and Beis Shammai holds that one is a olive and one's a large date. And that we're on the large, the first wide line in Zion on base on 7b, and just in beer. How much do you have? What do you have to destroy? If you find it, do you have to destroy it? I mean, of course you're not allowed to eat it. However, do you have to destroy it? Beis Shammai holds the halachas of destruction, the halacha to destroy chametz, is not derived from that of achila. Just because eating is going to be the size of an olive, not necessarily is destroying required for the size of an olive. And Beis Hillel simply learns, we learn one from the other. If one is going to be forbidden, then you got to destroy it. If you don't have to destroy it, then it's not going to be forbidden daraisa. Now, Itbar Nami, Amar Rabbi Yisi Bar Chanina, Machlekes le'inin be'ir, Av le'inin achila divra kol zev ezepek ezayis. And Rabbi Yisi Bar Chanina himself says, the entire argument is only on the issue of destroying it, of burning it. However, and removing it from your house, the requirement to look around and remove it from your house. However, when it comes to eating it, that's not a problem, and both of them are going to be with kazayis. Now, we also learned so this is the verse. The verse states in Shemais that I'll just read the verse. Matzis yachel is shiva siyamim. You should eat matzis for 7 days. You should not see chametz. You should not see sa'ar. So you see from here, when the Torah brings down, there's two words, sa'ar, the starter dough, and chametz, the regular bread, it's under the word of yira'ah, you should not see. So you see from here that when does the Torah, and that's the very verse where Beis Shammai learns that why does the Torah have to tell us sa'ar? Why does the Torah have to tell us both starter dough and chametz? Just tell us to one, we'll know the other. It must be that to two different sizes. That is the very verse that's talking about you shouldn't see. It doesn't say you shouldn't eat. So even if Beis Shammai is true that we can derive from this verse that there's two different sizes, that's not going on eating. The Torah specifically says you should not see it. This is the argument to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether one is allowed to see it and destroy it. So Beis Shammai says that the starter dough you're not allowed to see more than a olive size. And chametz is the size of a large date. Beis Hillel says no. He maintains eating is equal to destruction. They're all on the same plane, and therefore they're both going to be the size of an olive. So that is machlekes. Machlekes is not going on eating. Daraisa, of course, the Rabbanan not allowed to eat anything, the littlest amount. Now we're talking about destroying. And Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree when it comes to chametz, it's an olive size, but the starter dough is going to be a machlekes, but we go with Beis Hillel, of course, that is the size of a kazayis. Now, the Mishnah continued and said, we had a machlekes, an argument, when it comes to someone's slaughtering a bird or wild animal. Now, part of the process is you're supposed to cover the blood. The question is on Yom Tov, how do I go ahead and cover the dam? How do I go ahead and actually cover it? Because it might be muksa, I might not have it. Am I allowed to dig on Yom Tov to get that dirt in order to cover it? Remember, you're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov. Problem is covering the blood. So in the Mishnah, we had a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai said, very simple, go take a shovel. You're allowed to dig up dirt to cover the blood. Simple scenario. Beis Hillel said, no, you only should shecht on condition you had dirt set aside before Yom Tiv. And that is the machlekes. And now we're going to go into what is the source of the machlekes, why is one, and how does Beis Shammai know? So for the first off is as follows: Hasheichet. So if the words of Beis Shammai is Hasheichet, the one that slaughters, he could go dig up dirt and dig up dirt and cover the blood. Now, if the Gemara focused on the word Hasheichet, the one who goes and actually slaughters, b'diavad, that's only meaning if you happen to go do it, and once it's done, okay, fine, go find dirt to cover. Then you could dig. But on the onset, if you didn't shecht yet, don't slaughter unless you actually have dirt set aside. So that's the Diskind of the Mishnah. So it seems like Beis Hillel says you should never slaughter unless you have dirt set aside. And Beis Hillel, and it seems like Beis Shammai is saying not that you could freely go shecht and slaughter whether you have dirt or not. If you happen to slaughter, then you have to go dig up dirt to cover it. But initially, don't start unless you have dirt set aside. On that we have a problem because Ema Seifa. Let's look at the next part of the Mishnah. And we're going to quote the Mishnah. You should not shecht. You should not slaughter. The Tanakama Savar Yishchait. So if you look towards Beis Hillel, it doesn't say. And if you look at the words of Beis Hillel, it says you should not slaughter. So that would mean that the Reisha, meaning the Tanakam, who in this case is Beis Shammai, he's not saying Hasheichet, he's saying Yishchait. It's fine. He's arguing on the Tanakama, on Beis Shammai. If Beis Hillel himself says you should not slaughter, that means that Beis Shammai says you could slaughter, whether you have dirt or you don't have dirt. So it seems like there's a bit of a argument to Beis Hillel and the wording of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai to prove, according to Beis Shammai, it looks like on the onset one should not slaughter unless you have dirt set aside. And the words, and you could derive from the words of Beis Hillel that Beis Shammai holds no. Even if you don't have dirt, it's fine, and you don't have to look, and it's lechatchila, it's fine. So that we say halei kasha, it's not a contradiction. Lo yishchait v'yichasek amar. What Beis Hillel means to say is that one should not go ahead and shecht, and then go ahead and cover, and then cover the dirt. Meaning, we can't derive from the words of Beis Shammai, from the words of Beis Hillel, that Beis Shammai holds. Meaning, we can't derive from the words of Beis Hillel that Beis Shammai hold that the yishchait of the word, when Beis Hillel said the word slaughter, it's not coming to tell us that Beis Hillel holds that one is allowed to lechatchil go ahead and do it, because he says Beis Hillel meant to say you should not slaughter and you should not cover lechatchila. But even according to Beis Hillel, if you happen to do it, you should go ahead and cover it, so you can't learn that out from the words of Beis Hillel. Now, Ema Seifa. Now we have another problem. Let's go even further in the Mishnah. Now, even Beis Hillel admits that if one goes ahead and slaughters, that even according to Beis Hillel, if one does slaughter and does not have dirt, he's allowed to go ahead and dig up dirt to cover it up. Now, in that we have a problem. If Beis Hillel himself holds that if one, by mistake, slaughtered without any dirt, he should go ahead and cover it. And obviously, Beis Shammai doesn't hold that, because that's the same exact opinion as Beis Hillel. Must be Beis Hillel said. Beis Shammai holds that it's fine. On the onset, even if you don't have dirt, you could go slaughter it. And that we say, Hu Amar. So now we have a few answers to answer up this problem. Hu Amar Rabba Hachi Kamar. So Rabba has the following answer: Hashoichet sheba limelach ketzad. Now, so what does it mean Hashoichet? Hashoichet doesn't mean it's the one who happened to slaughter, only now he should dig, but if he didn't have dirt to begin with, he shouldn't have started. It means he's the one that comes and asks you, what should I do? I slaughtered and I don't have any dirt set aside. So Amrlai Beis Shammai. So Amrlai Beis Shammai, Amrlai Shachait Chafar V'chaseh. And that Beis Shammai says, yes, go ahead and cover. It's not a problem. I mean, Hashoichet means the one who comes and asks, not the one who slaughters. The one who slaughters then comes and asks. And the Beis Shammai will say, yes, it's fine. You did the right thing, and you're allowed to dig up. Beis Hillel will say, don't shecht yet. You wait. That's one to understand the hay, the extra hay, the one that slaughters comes to the one that comes to ask you before he slaughters. No, Rabbi Yosef Amar, Yosef has a bit of a different answer, and he's different than Rabbah. Hachi Kamar, this is how we understand it. Hashoichet sheba lihimali, that is someone who's going to slaughter. He comes and asks, Ketzad Amrlai, what do you tell him? Bisham Aimrim Amrlach Chafer Shoichet V'Chaser. That Bishamai says that first you should dig, then you should slaughter, and then you should cover it. And Basil says no, you shall not slaughter unless you have dirt set aside from before Yom Tov. Now, what you have to focus on what is the difference between Rabbah and Rav Yosef. They seem very similar, but if you look at the words, both of them say that if someone comes and asks you what to do, Beishamai is going to say slaughter and cover up the blood, and Rav Yosef says the same thing. So what's the answer? So if you look at the words of Rav Yosef, it's a little different than Rabbah. The difference is, according to Rav Yosef, it says first you should dig, then you should slaughter. That's the second opinion. The first opinion, according to Rabbah, is that you should slaughter and then you should dig. And it's just now, so that's the difference. If you should dig first or not, you should have the dirt ready or not. That's the question. Now, who cares? Like, how's that a machlekes? How is that enough to make an argument in the Gemara between two sages if one should slaughter first then dig or dig then slaughter? What's the significance? So that's what we're going to focus on right now. So Amrei Abaya, Rabbi Yosef. So Abaya turned to Rabbi Yosef and said, now Rabbi Yosef is the one that said the second answer, that you're supposed to dig first. So Abaya said to Rabbi Yosef, Lema mar v'rabba b'drab zera amarav kamifuk. Maybe perhaps, so Abaya was offering to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef himself is arguing on Rabbah, and Abaya turns to Rabbi Yosef and says, perhaps you and Rabbah are arguing on the following on the following point. Not Rab Zera Amar Rav, because Rab Zera in the name of Rav says, Hashoichet tzarich shyitain afar lamata v'afar lamala. That the one who slaughters, you are, when it comes to the bird, you're required first to put dirt on bottom, pour, and then slaughter the bird and let the blood drip onto the dirt, and then put dirt on top. Shinamar, like it says, the verse states, "V'shafach es damai v'chiso ba'afar," and you spill the blood, and then you cover it ba'afar. Afar lo'nemar. It doesn't say you cover it. Cover dirt on it. It says you cover it with dirt. So we see from there that you have to put, one is required to put blood on top and blood on bottom. Now, the Mar Islay, the Rab Zera. Now, Rabbi Yosef, who said first you have to dig and then you have to slaughter, makes sense, because first you have to dig and get dirt to begin with. You slaughter, and then because you need dirt initially during the time of slaughter, let the blood go on top of it, and then you go ahead and you cover up the blood on top of it. So therefore, Rabbi Yosef said you should dig up first, because you have to dig up first. He holds like Rab Zera that you need two layers. Now, the Rabbah, let's say Rab Zera, and Rabbah didn't hold Rab Zera. So if someone comes and asks him, could I slaughter or not? And that Rabbah would say, of course, first slaughter, and then you dig up. Rabbi Yosef held first you needed the dirt to begin with, so dig, then slaughter. Very simple machlekes, very simple argument. So Amrlei, so Rabbi Yosef turned to Rabbah, and Yosef turned to Abai and said, no, not so fast. That's not the reason. That is not the source of the argument between myself and Rabbah. Rather, Bein Lididi, Bein LaRabbah, Islam Rab Zera. It could be me and myself and Rabbah agreed to Rab Zera that you have to have two layers. And this is the argument to myself and Rabbah. Rabbah Savak I'ika Afar Lamata in Iloiloi, that according to Rabbah, he held that if you have dirt on bottom, then you could slaughter. If you don't have dirt yet, you cannot slaughter. Chashinon Dilma Mamlich V'Leishachet. That he held is that if it's true, you're supposed to go look at the zera, and you're supposed to have blood on the bottom layer first. But if you don't have blood, if you don't have dirt yet on Yom Tov, we're not going to go tell you to go dig to get the dirt before you slaughter. Because let's say you change your mind, I don't want to slaughter, and so you dug for no reason. You end up digging on Yom Tov for no reason at all because you changed your mind about slaughtering. So if you have dirt prepared, okay, fine, you should go. You could utilize that dirt as the bottom layer. But But if you don't have dirt prepared, first slaughter and then go dig, because we don't want you to dig and then change your mind, and it being that you dug for no reason on Yom Tov. But me, Rabbi Yosef saying on himself, ha'adifa, I hold it's better to dig first. If you don't allow him to dig, he might not want to do it because he wants to follow the halacha properly, and then he'll go ahead and stop himself from doing it, and then he's gonna stop himself from enjoying Yom Tov and not having meat, which you're supposed to have basar, you're supposed to have meat and wine on Yom Tov, and therefore I told him to go ahead and dig it first. Okay. I don't want to make any gzeiras, in order to make it that much easier for people to go ahead and enjoy Yom Tov. So that was the machlokes. So that explained if one is supposed to go according to at the end of the day, though, according to Shammai, one is allowed to slaughter initially, even if you had no dirt, then go dig. And according to Beis Hillel, one should try to have dirt set aside before Yom Tov. It happens to be that he doesn't have dirt set aside before Yom Tov, he shouldn't slaughter. But if he does slaughter, then you're allowed to go ahead and dig. Okay, now, okay. Now, now, everyone agrees, Beis Hillel agrees to Bisham that if you did slaughter and you don't have any dirt, you're allowed to dig with a spade and cover it. Amarav Zrika, Amarav Yehuda. So Zrika said the name of Yehuda. You need the shovel or the spade stuck in the ground before Yom Tov begins. Now, and that we say because then you're not really digging, right? Because you already sort of made that initial hole. You weren't chayrish, you didn't plow, you didn't make any holes in the ground because if the spade was already stuck in the ground before daytime, before Yom Tov, when I pick it up, the hole already started because the spade was already in the ground. Now we ask but still, this other isurim going to take place automatically. Even if you pull it out and some dirt comes out of it, it's going to be clumped up and you're going to have to break it apart. And so there's plenty of halachas that are still the araisas that are going to take place. So if you're trying to minimize any daraisas, that's still going to happen. And that we say, Amrav Chia bar Ashi Amarav, and that we're on the top of Ches Amar Aleph. We turn to the top of 8a. Ba'afar Tuchluach. We're talking about loose dirt. There's not going to be a problem of it falling apart. Now we say Ka'avad Guma, but you're going to make furrows in the ground. So it's very true that you're not initially sort of you're not breaking the ground open, but still you're still going to make furrows, and that's not be a problem of chayrish, but it's going to be a problem of binyan, problem of building. So Rav Abba, the halach we go like Rav Abba. Rav Abba, hachoy for gumas b'Shabbos. If someone makes furrows and holes in the ground on Shabbos, ve'ini tzarich el afra, and you don't want the hole, you just want the dirt. Pater aleha, you're pater, and the reason you're not allowed to do it. But if you do it, you're going to be pater, and you're going to be free of any sin. And the reason is that Rashi explains that's makalkel. You're destroying. If you don't want the hole and you just want the dirt, then there's nothing constructive happening by making the hole. All you want is the dirt. Really, I don't want the hole. Anything I didn't want holes in my ground. I just wanted to get a hold of dirt. This is the only way to do it. That's called you're being destructive. You're destroying. And the halacha is when it comes to Shabbos, for daraisa, you're only chayiv if it's in a constructive fashion, not a destructive fashion. Okay. Now the Mishnah continues, Sha'afar kira muchanu. Then we ended off with the Mishnah saying, and it happens to be that the ashes in the oven are also permitted. They're prepared. Right? One of the problems with random dirt before Shabbos is that it's muksa. Not only is there a problem with digging, even if you didn't dig. If you have some random dirt lying around, you could just grab a fistful. If it's not set aside, it's muksa. However, we did say that the ashes of the oven are going to be is considered prepared for Yom Tov. Therefore, they're set aside, and then once they're set aside, I could for sure utilize that for slaughtering my bird. So therefore, everyone back in the day, everyone had their ovens. That's how they kept food hot. They would burn it before Yom Tov, or even on Yom Tov, and the ashes remain hot for an extremely long time, and that's what they cooked with using the ashes, basically coals. So everyone has that, so therefore it shouldn't be a problem, and everyone has something. And now we ask, Afar Kira Man Shmei, why are we even mentioning the dirt, the ashes of the oven? No one brought that up. So Amarabba Haki Kamar, the Afar Kira Muchanu. It doesn't mean She'afar Kira Muchanu because the dirt, the ashes of the oven are prepared. Rather, it happens to be just telling us the fact that if you have nothing else, you can always just use the ashes of the kir, not take away the shin and leave and add a vav. Now, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, but and Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Lo shanu elish husak me'erev Yom Tov. The only times the ashes are permitted on Yom Tov is if the wood was lit to create the coals from Erev Yom Tov, on the onset of Yom Tov. Hosak Yom Tov. But if you go ahead and you actually light it on Yom Tov, Aser, it's going to be forbidden. Now, the reason why if I light the wood on Yom Tov for the first time, and that burns through the night, I wake up in the morning and it's all ashes and it's extremely hot. The reason why it's going to be forbidden, Rashi explains that it's noilid. That means that everyone agrees is noilid, because that is a chemical reaction, right? There's a chemical change from the wood to ashes. That is a chemical change. So therefore, at that point, that's a new creation. But yesterday was wood. On the onset of Shabbos was wood. Now we have ashes. That is a complete change. Therefore, it should be at least the fire should have started to create the ashes before Yom Tov. If it's on Yom Tov, then you have a problem because it's noilid. Now v'imrol with salis by Beitza, but if it's still hot enough to cook an egg, the ashes, it will be permitted. Now, the reason why it's going to be permitted is that yesterday, while it was still wood, it was still set aside to burn and to cook. So now it's true. Now, so even though yesterday it was wood, and now on Yom Tov it turned into ashes, but I still have a use for it. The wood was set aside for the wood itself was already muchan to burn, and therefore kol zman, as long as it's hot enough to go ahead and cook an egg. Therefore, at that point, it's still usable. It's not useless, and that was part of my intention on the onset of Shabbos. I want this to happen, so we still are able to view it as prepared. Now, Tani Nam Yahachi, Kishamru Afar Kira Muchanhu Loy Amru Elish Husak Me'erev Yom Tov. Again, we have a brisa to bring up this point that when we said that the ashes of the oven are prepared, we only said that concerning if you lit it if the wood is already lit Erev Yom Tov. Hosak be Yom Tov aser. But if you light it on Yom Tov, it will be forbidden. V'imrol etzalis like Beitza mutter, and everyone agrees that if it's still hot enough, even though it was lit on Yom Tov, if it was hot enough still to cook an egg, therefore the ashes itself have a use, therefore it will be permitted to cover the blood. Now, hechnes afar lignasa. Now let's say some brings in dirt into his garden and leaves it in a pile, or to his ruin. One is permitted to utilize. Meaning, if we see someone if someone Erev Yom Tov or sometime before that brought in dirt, carried dirt and placed it in the corner or placed it someplace in his garden, we know he plans on using it for something. That means that's good enough to be called set aside, and I can utilize that dirt to cover the blood. And it's not like dirt, some random dirt in my garden that's laying on the ground. That it's not like taking some dirt from a pot. It's not like just taking some mulch or something. Because since I set it aside for something specific, I didn't lay it out yet. I set it aside for something specific to still use for it. Now, Yehuda seems to be not just letting you have random piles of dirt. Rather, if you bring in dirt in a box and you set it in the corner of your house, that's good enough, and that's called prepared. Darsh Marzutra Mishmei de Marzutra Rabba V'Hushiyachile Karen Zavis. It has to be also that you didn't scatter the dirt all over the house. Back then they used to live in dirt houses, so they'd always be constantly bringing in dirt to resurface their floor. But in this case, if you resurface the floor, then it's already part of the floor and you can't take it. But if you brought in a box full of dirt and you placed the box in the corner, or you empty the contents in the corner, but it's in a nice pile, again, that means you plan on using it. That's called prepared, set aside for some human use before Shabbos, before Yom Tov. Therefore, it will be permitted to be, it has to be Yom Tov. When you slaughter on Yom Tov, it will be permitted to cover the blood of the bird. Now, we have the following question. Kai. Now, a kai was this type of an animal. We weren't sure if it was a animal, or we weren't sure if it was a wild animal. The difference is, do we cover the blood or not, right? The lach is a behema, a bull, a sheep, a goat. These are domestic animals. Domesticated animals do not require blood to be covered, their blood to be covered. Wild animals do. The kai weren't sure. So we would cover the blood out of doubt. Now we say, Kai in sheichten oise b'yomtiv. You should not slaughter a kai on Yom Tiv. If you do shachta, if you do slaughter it, you shouldn't cover its blood. Now, the reason why we're not going to cover it, assumingly, is because we don't know what to do. Do we have to cover it or not? Since it's a doubtful how we go ahead and do we have to cover it? We'd rather not enter that realm, that possibility. So therefore, don't shachta. And if you do shachta, then you shouldn't cover it because again, it's out of doubt, and therefore we're not going to cover it. Now, and now we say, why can't you slaughter it if you had dirt set aside? Like Rabbi Yehuda says, I carry a bucket of dirt into my house and set it in the corner is permitted. So go ahead and slaughter the kite and utilize that dirt. What's the problem? And now we say, according to your reasoning, so then why are you bringing Rabbi Yehuda? If this is true, that as long as I have something set aside, non-muksa dirt, I can take that dirt and cover the blood. Why are you bringing Rabbi Yehuda, who just said, if you bring the dirt with a box and you put it in the corner? That's according to anyone. According to the previous opinion, we said if you already have, according to one, if the shovel is already in the ground. According to someone else, you have the dirt you have the ashes in the oven. So why are we specifically putting the blame only in the scenario where I have prepared dirt in my house, in a box, in the corner, then go ahead and slaughter the kite? In any scenario, you have ashes in your oven, go utilize the ashes, and if you have a spade in the ground, you could use that. Must be, he didn't have a spade in the ground. He didn't have ashes in the oven, and he's just left with the case of Yehuda. He happens to have a box in the corner with dirt. If that's the case, if the scenario doesn't have it, so also, it must be, he doesn't have dirt like Rabbi Yehuda set aside in the corner. And therefore, the only scenario is that he might have to dig. For that, we're not willing to let you dig in order to get dirt, in order to cover a questionable animal that we're not sure whether it requires its blood covered or not. Now, if that's so, my area suffix afilu vade nami light. Now, if it's that there's nothing prepared, on that we say, why does it say, if you have nothing prepared, then why is it a suffix bird? Meaning this bird, this animal, which you're not sure if it needs it or not. Even if you know for a fact that you need it, you slaughter a chicken that for sure, vadai, 100% requires the blood. If you have nothing prepared, then according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not supposed to cover it, right? So what's the difference? So again, what is the difference between this animal, which we're not sure if you cover it or not, and every other animal? If you can't cover it, you can't cover it. If you could cover it, you could cover it. What is the difference? Now we say yommi b'ikama. No, we meant to say is as follows. We said not only do you not slaughter, according to Beis Hillel, if you don't have dirt, we said don't slaughter. We said not only should you not slaughter an animal that requires the blood to be covered, but this kai, which we're not sure, now it's a doubt. Does it need to be covered or not? And that much we're going to say, you know what? It's a doubt anyway. Let you go ahead and slaughter it. You don't have to cover it because it's doubtful. Anyway, we don't even know if you need to cover it. And therefore, you could go ahead and enjoy your Simchas Yom Tiv. You could go ahead and enjoy Yom Tiv properly. Kamash Milan, no. Even, yeah.
Why would any animal not require dirt?
No, so there are, there's the regular barn animals.
Right.
Those do not require to have their blood covered. It's only birds and wild animals. Like if you catch a deer. That's going to require it.
Is there a dragonin requirement to cover the blood?
No, this is a daraisa.
Say what?
It is a daraisa.
But yeah, okay, I'm easily confused. Obviously, you just said that one class of animal requires having the blood covered after slaughtering,
Yes.
and the other doesn't.
Correct.
Okay, that's how it plays out. Because I was under the impression, well, of course, I used to work at a butcher shop millennia ago, and of course, I guess you only get domestic animals in there. So the question of what to do with
Birds also.
the coyote that never came up.
Also birds.
Uh-huh.
No, so the Torah specifically says wild birds and wild animals need to cover, the blood should be covered.
Because we had, there was sawdust covering the floor and beef nuts all over the place. But maybe that's just a general.
No, it's only during slaughter. No, it's only the initial slaughter. At the time of slaughter, you're supposed to sprinkle a bit of dirt over the blood. That's all. Any blood that comes afterwards is not a problem.
I see.
So that's the halacha. But we usually don't do it because if you slaughter a cow or a goat, you're not going to cover the blood. It's only wild animals. And wild animals.
So we don't, in the Rabbanon, we don't cover the blood of domestic animals.
That is true. Even Draban.
All right.
Now, so we're coming out over here is that, again, why do we bring down this case of the koi, this case of this animal, which is doubt if it needs it or not? We said the reasons come to teach you. I think that it's true according to Beis, chicken, which requires it, requires covering the blood. If you don't have the dirt, don't slaughter on Yom Tov. Now I'm going to think, but a animal which is in doubt if it needs it anyway to begin with, where perhaps we'll say, no, go ahead and slaughter it and don't cover it because we want you to enjoy Yom Tov, and it's a doubt anyway. And that we say no, it has the same status as the animal which for sure requires it, and therefore, and which for sure require it, and you shouldn't go ahead and slaughter it. Now we continue on Chesam Beis on 8b. Now Hamiktani Seifa Imshachtu Ein Machsen as Damai. Now in the Seifa of our Mishnah, we said that if you end up shechting, if you end up slaughtering it, Beis said don't cover its blood. Mechlal we see from here, but the Islay Mechlal we see from here, but the Islay Askina. It must be that we're talking about a case is where you had the Reish is obviously talking about a case where you had when you actually had dirt. So we wanted to say that the reason that the case of the koi, the case of the animal, which we're not sure about, the only time we said if you have dirt, we want to propose the reason why you shouldn't slaughter it is that it's a case when you don't have dirt. You have nothing set aside. We don't want you to dig on Yom Tov. Beis says you're not allowed to dig on Yom Tov for the dirt, and therefore you're not allowed to slaughter it. But our understanding is that this animal, which is in the state of doubt if it needs to be covered or not, if you have dirt, go ahead and slaughter it. There's nothing wrong with it, and go take the dirt, which is muchan, which is prepared before day. But the problem is, it seems like we're saying that this animal, that even if you have dirt, you shouldn't slaughter it. So why not? Alama Rabba Afar Kira Muchan Levadai Ve'in Muchan Lasafik. Now the reason is that the dirt of a set-aside dirt is only prepared for something which you for sure are going to, which is required, which is fully required, and a chicken, which is, or any animal, or any bird, and any wild animal that for sure needs the blood covered. That is that is something that I set aside for. But I never set aside any dirt that I have in the house that I set aside is not going to be. I never thought about setting it aside for a suffix, for a doubtful animal. So this kite, which we're not sure if you need it or not, even if you did slaughter it, and even if you do have dirt, you should not cover it because the dirt is set aside for a vadai, for an animal which for sure 100% requires it, not for an animal which doubtfully requires it. So it will be muksa for the animal. It will be permitted for the hen, for example, which is the chicken, or which is required, but it won't be it's not set aside for the animal which we're in doubt for. Because that's muksa. Therefore, that's what the Torah tells. That's why the Brisa was telling us, do not slaughter a kite. Even if you have dirt, it's going to be forbidden, and it will be muksa. And the Gemara is going to continue with this, but we're going to have to end here.
So, the chicken, the blood from the chicken has to be covered, but the blood from the cow
Does not have to be covered.
and a wild animal and chicken.
Or bird. Any bird.
Any bird.
Okay, well, have a great day tomorrow. It was
advertised an hour before.
It's advertised an hour before, but maybe I'm gonna. Wait, what time? What's an hour before? 6:15.
6:10. Tomorrow. No, it's 6. Says milk from.
All right, whatever. I can do an hour before. I'm just whatever. I'll try to keep it. I'm not gonna cover as much as usual. I'll try to. Should we just switch it to 40? Does everyone want to switch it to like 45 minutes before? Because it's Rosh Hashanah, you want more time.
I'd move to 45.
Yeah, maybe we should go an hour.
Very good. What do you want?
I don't care.
You say usually in Yom Tov you do 50 minutes, so let's do 45 minutes.
Anytime we were doing an hour was
On Shabbos, yeah, I understand. Yeah, but then, so it's 50, right? 50 minutes, because usually we do 50 now, right?
We do 50,
Yeah. So we'll do 50. I'll tell them 50 minutes before, and 10 minutes. If someone comes 10 minutes early, he comes 10 minutes early. It's not a big deal. Okay. Take care, everyone.
7:20.
Have a great Yom Tov.
6:20.
Yeshkoach.